We all have toxic family members. We might be the toxic ones, but the truth is that toxic family members exist, and sometimes it's us. And we have to navigate operating in the family with those toxic people or with ourselves, and we have to learn how to do it well as Christians. And in today's episode, I want to talk to you about how to navigate relationships in your family when someone is toxic. So we are here on the You, Me, and Jesus podcast, and I like to be honest. I like to be transparent. Y'all know I say that all the time. And today I want to kind of talk a little bit in detail about how I navigate toxic relationships, okay, in my family. So I'm only going to talk about one person. This person has passed away now, and it's fine, okay? And that person is my uncle. So I will start this off by saying I am not trying to badmouth my uncle. I'm not trying to badmouth the dearly departed, but I'm more so like, I always like to share my personal experiences so that you can feel like it's normal. It's not supposed to be this way, but you can feel like it's normal, so you can see yourself. And so then you can start on this journey with God on how to navigate your own. Okay. All right. So I am the fourth child of my mom. She has four girls. My mom, I think my mom is the oldest. Is she the oldest? No, I think she's the oldest. I can't remember. There's my mom, there's my aunt, and then there was my uncle. I'm pretty sure my uncle was the baby. I think my aunt is the oldest. Can't remember. And ever since I have known my uncle, he has been, we use the word toxic, right? And yes, on so many levels, right? Ever since I've known my uncle, he's very funny, or was very funny, very vivacious, big personality, but he was always, always, always on drugs. Okay. That is all that I know. I only know Uncle Tony that has always been on drugs. I don't know him that was not. I don't know any situation where there weren't opportunities where he would show up in the toxic, thing or whatever. And when I think about my journey with him, when I realized like Uncle Tony, like when I'm like an adult, like high school, college, all that type of stuff, my first remembrance of him was we lived in this apartment building, and I guess my uncle had broken in and he stole a bunch of stuff so that he could sell it and he could make money and he could buy drugs. I just remember how much of an uproar my mom was in and how unsafe we were and all that, and how painful that was for my mom, and then of course for our family. And I always remember my mom and my grandma, my grandpa always complaining about him and stuff. And I remember as a child, when I started to have things that could be stolen, how I felt when we knew he was coming around, how we would hide things, right? I remember when I used to sell candy and money would come up missing. Granted, I don't think he was the one. I think it was actually other people in my family that were stealing because he wasn't around. But I remember when I was selling candy, I would hide it when I knew he was going to be around, and then when I got into adulthood, he was no longer in our lives. And what I mean by that is that we were now living in Kentucky and my Uncle Tony was living somewhere else. So he wasn't present in our lives every day like that. So we didn't see him like that. We only saw him whenever we saw him, But I did have this knowing that if Uncle Tony called me and asked me for money, that I would always say no, right? I don't remember him calling me in my college years and my older years, asking me for money, but I knew I had this awareness that if he called and asked for money, tell him no, right? And I knew that my family felt the exact same way, that like, keep him away from our stuff, or he's going to steal everything, we're going to lose everything or whatever. And I remember, this was more recent, when, how do I say this? I'm trying to be super respectful to my family. So my grandma is or was always, she was elderly, right? And so her health was not always in the best condition. She wasn't living in the best condition with my family. I won't go into that. And I had this heightened awareness that her time on earth was not going to be forever, right? And so I would check in. If I would call home to my family, it would be to talk to my grandma, to check on my grandma, always check on my grandma, right? And about 2 years ago, I was sitting at my table thinking about going home to visit my family, and I was asking God about it. And he said, go home in September, because I was going to go home for Christmas. He said, no, go home in September. And I was like, September? He said, yeah. And I was like, okay, right? And I'm not thinking anything of it. Plan this trip, and none of my family know I'm coming. And I am at my first layover, and I check my voicemail, check my text messages, and everybody's going bananas. My sisters, my mom, grandma's passing away. I mean, it's just going bananas. And I am just like, what is going on? And I remember, like, who's the calmest person in the family? Call my aunt. So I call my aunt, like, what is going on? And she's just telling me what they're saying and all of that. They didn't even know I was on my way to them. So then I revealed I'm actually on a layover on my way to you guys. So I'll be there in a couple hours, right? And so I am like bugging out, and my aunt thinks that my grandma's dehydrated. She thinks all type of stuff. And so I am just like, okay, let's just talk to the Holy Spirit. And Holy Spirit tells me something's going on with her, yada, yada, yada. And so when I get there, I am springing into action, because I can't say that people there were wise, able-bodied, mentally people, right? So when I got into my grandma's room, it was super hot. It felt like somebody was passing away. It just like the feeling of it, the spirituality of it. And I knew she could barely talk and all this stuff. And I had this big old thing of water that I had just gotten from the store. And so I was just like, and I was just trying to get her to drink the water. Meanwhile, I got to my niece and her boyfriend. I was like, go to the store, get Pedialyte. It's going to help with hydration. And so they go. And then when they go, I just ask everybody else to please just leave the room. Just leave the room. Because I'm like, I got to get this situation calm. I got to talk to God, right? And this is not normal for me to do this, but I was just like, I just knew I had to get them out the room. This reminds me of like, remember when Jesus was like, the little girl was dead and Jesus was like, everybody out, right? It reminds me of like that moment. It just happened, right? And I got everybody to get out. And for some reason, I ended up having an extra communion cup in my purse. And I'm getting my grandma to drink the water. I'm getting my grandma to drink the water and the Pedialyte and all that type of stuff. And I get my grandma to kind of sit up or something. I can't remember. And I was like, hey, grandma, I was like, so I'm not sure what's happening, but I need to know, what do you want? Do you want to live? I feel emotional. And she said, yes. And I said, okay. I was like, so we are going to pray for you to live. And I was like, and I've got this communion cup. Oh my God, I'm so emotional. And I just got the juice and I got the cracker and was like, she couldn't really eat, couldn't really drink. And I was like, give her as much as she can. And so she took as much as she could, which is not a whole lot, communion cups. And then I did the rest. And I was just like, I had my hand on her and I was just praying. And I was just like talking to God. And I was like rebuking the spirit of death, so on and so on and so on and so on. So then the room just like calmed. Right. And so then she's drinking water, drinking Pedialyte, and now she's able to talk more. And I'm just like talking through her and getting my sister to come over. And I'm just like, Grandma, she's thinking she's fine. And I'm like, Grandma, you can't even walk. And she was like trying to fathom what in her mind. And I was just like, Grandma, you don't understand. You are in a really bad situation. You can't even get up and walk right now. You think you can, but you can't. You've got to go to the emergency room. And I'm just talking with her calmly. And I said, okay, will you go to the emergency room? I said, I will go with you. And she's like, yes, great. Call the ambulance. They come, they take her away. I get in the car and I go to the emergency room with her. And of course, I'm traumatized because I came for vacation. Why aren't y'all doing this? Nonetheless, thank God I had a rental car. And I spend that whole hours with her in the emergency room. And so initially I'm okay, but then I just start getting upset because I'm like, how could y'all let this come to this? I live in California. Why aren't y'all doing stuff? And her daughter and all this stuff, whatever. So then, she's in there, and then I'm scheduled to go home. So then I go home, and 2 days later, I get the call that she passed away. And I'm like, oh, obviously traumatized. I'm thankful that I heard God to go out there when I did. And then I start getting these messages from my Uncle Tony, and he is going off on me on Facebook Messenger. And I'm like, why is he going off on me? And he's going off on me because he's like, why didn't you tell me what was going on with my mama? This is your fault. And da 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 da. And I'm looking at these messages like, I don't live there. I just came in for vacation. How in the world? What does this have to do with me? And I think it was because at the time, because I was the one in the emergency room with her, that I was the one making decisions. And then I was trying to move things along to her daughter to make decisions or whatever. So because he couldn't have his say and I was the one having the say, I guess he was getting upset. And he just kept blaming me. He was going off on me in Facebook Messenger. And I finally was like, first of all, I don't even live here. And I just told him all those things. And I was like, second, if you weren't on drugs, strung out, you would have been here taking care of your mama. This has nothing to do with me. This has got to do with you. You are her son. I am her granddaughter. And then I blocked him. And that was it. And then I heard everybody else that was at the family talking about, here's what Uncle Tony's saying about you, this, and this. And I'm looking at them like, this is a y'all issue. This is not a me issue. This is a y'all issue, right? But that was very, very toxic, And even after she passed, the funeral and all that, I was just like, I left him blocked because I was like, I am traumatized, right? And my grandma passed. I have got to figure out how I can navigate my life and then navigate the grief that I have about my grandma passing. And then the trauma of all of the things that can't happen, right? And I was like, and having this person around is not going to help. And so I blocked him and I left him blocked. And it wasn't until somebody, like my sister, called or texted me and said, hey, Tony's got cancer. He doesn't have a long time left. You should go and see him in Georgia. And I thought about it and I felt guilty. I felt like, I should go and book a flight and go see him in Georgia. And then I was just like, no, I don't need to go and spend $400 on flight, rental car, all this stuff, take time off from work when I can call him on the phone, right? As much as I would love to go and see him, I was like, that is a big ask of myself to go and do that. And I felt a little bit of guilt. And so, but I did call. And when I called, his wife got him on the phone. He couldn't really talk a whole lot, but he was joking the way he normally does. And I'm talking to him and I'm just talking to him. And I told him I loved him, da, 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 da. And then very soon after that, he passed away. And I can't say that I feel a lot of guilt about that anymore. I feel like I had to protect me. I had to take care of me. I couldn't focus on taking care of everybody else who was going to take care of me, And I think that a lot of times in our families, we have this guilt that we feel or this false responsibility of what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to be and behave because they're our family. And I think we get an amazing opportunity to see how God sees things, right? Like God had his 12, right? And even with the 12, he had 3, right? And it doesn't mean that the world was toxic. It just meant that Jesus knew that he had to have certain people around him. Everybody could have access to a degree, but they couldn't have intimacy, And I think that sometimes because we're born into a family that we feel like everybody should be able to have and be and all this type of stuff. And it's not the case because sometimes people don't treat themselves well. So they're definitely not going to treat you well. right? People don't value themselves, so they definitely aren't going to value you well, right? And then sometimes people just don't know you. They don't know how and what you need, and they're not trying to figure that out. They're not trying to ask you, right? And it is our responsibility to look at ourselves first and say, what do I need? How do I give myself what I need? Also, who in my life has something that they can offer me to navigate whatever time or season that I'm in? And then you can decide what aspects of you, if any, that you can offer to other people, right? But I don't think that we do that. I think we just allow this, and we get to go, hold up. Because if you are that willing to just go gangbusters, whatever you got going on, without any regard for me, what am I doing? Right? Like my Uncle Tony could just go off and do all of what's going on with him. I don't think he had it all together, but that has nothing to do with me. It has to do with him. Right? But because I have it together, sort of, I get to go, ooh, I don't really like what I'm experiencing there. Let me put that to the side so I can figure out me. You know what I mean? And if you are finding yourself dealing with toxic family members, you have got to assess the people. You've got to assess the relationship. You've got to assess the access, okay? Because if you do not, they will determine how the relationship is, how it goes, and all that type of stuff, and you're not going to like it, okay? You not going to like it. It's just the way that it goes. And you have to decide that. Listen, I always say that boundaries are not bad. Boundaries teach people how to come in, right? I tell people, this is our relationship, and this is how you can come in to our relationship, right? And people know, okay, here's what that is. Like, for example, I had somebody recently who we normally would talk, and the person starts going through something really hard while I also had gone through something really hard or whatever. And they're not checking on me as much. I'm not checking on them as much. There's a lot going on in all of our lives. We're really grown people, And then all of a sudden one day I get this message from this person, and they're talking or whatever, which is fine. But I was at a business conference, and they said what they said, and I didn't respond within 20, 30 minutes or whatever. And then that person followed up with asking if I was mad at them or how things have changed between us. And I'm like, I'm not sure what you mean. And they were like, well, I just felt like things have changed, And I'm like, well, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm at a business conference, so I'm going to have to get back to you once I get out of my business conference. And they were like, well, I didn't know you're at a conference. And I'm thinking to myself, doesn't matter. I shouldn't have to tell you all this information about what's going on with me for you to just understand that you're messaging me, and I will message you back as time permits, like as I can. You know what I mean? And I think that I gave myself the parameter of like, hey, wait a minute, you're doing too much. I will get back to you as soon as I am able. Please don't put on me whatever's going on with you. Don't put that on me, because that has nothing to do with me. Right. And I had to but I had to put parameters with that person of being like, hey, you can't put on me expecting me to respond in all these different times. I'm doing this right now. I got all this going on. As soon as I am able, I'll get back to you, and we get to do that. She gets to do that to me, and I get to do it to her or others. You know what I mean? And it's healthy to do that. So if you're dealing with someone that is toxic, quote unquote toxic, I want you to ask the Holy Spirit, what is happening there with that person? How do you see what is happening with that person? And how do I navigate that? Because in our What Would Jesus Do segment, if Jesus was encountering a person who was toxic, Jesus would sit that person down and talk to them and let them talk and try to help that person just express. And then Jesus talked back to that person and help them see themselves in a way where they can be enlightened and they can go on a journey of growth. If Jesus encountered someone who was dealing with a toxic family member, Jesus would sit down and have a conversation with that person and would assess what is going on, what does that person feel, what does that person need, and how can they give themselves what they need, and what does it look like to be in relationship with this person. Right? He would help them come to a conclusion of what does it look like to be healthy in this relationship. And if he assessed that, no contact for a period of time is what's healthy, then I think Jesus would say sometimes separation is healthy. That doesn't mean completely blocking them out of your life. I blocked him off of Facebook. It wasn't out of my life, just Facebook. It doesn't mean forever. It means, whatever. Come back when you got, you know what I'm saying? And I think he would be empathetic. I think he would be a solution oriented. And I think he would be very much you minded. Okay. So if you enjoyed today's episode, I would love to know it. Let me know if you enjoyed today's episode. You can tell me in the show. You can tell me here on YouTube in the description, or you can tell me on the podcast. Now, I'm not really hearing from you guys. So I know you're watching. I know you're listening. I would love to know what you think.